Book of Demons is a dungeon crawling, hack and slash, generic fantasy RPG. I probably play about a dozen of these games every year and ignore about a dozen more. As far as indie video games go, this is about as standard as you can get, and yet somehow, Book of Demons isn't like anything I've ever played. It's designed as an homage to Diablo. The developers Think Trunk have actually planned out a full 7-game series of tributes to iconic 90s video games, all set within their Paperverse, a universe that exists entirely within a folding pop-up book. It's an ambitious project from a small development team, but if all those titles can have the same level of polish as Book of Demons, then soon we'll be looking at an indie game powerhouse. Also, I can't wait to play the folded paper versions of Crash Bandicoot, Championship Manager and Banjo-Kazooie. So there are 3 classes in Book of Demons: Warrior, Archer and Mage, but to begin with you can only play as the Warrior. There's also 2 difficulty settings, Normal and Roguelike, but you'll probably play the Normal mode first, and so that's what I'm going to focus on. The core gameplay is unusual. There's a track in every dungeon and you can only move back and forth along this fixed path around the level. When you attack, you don't run up to enemies and swing, you highlight an enemy in range and your character starts attacking them. At first, this is all you can do, but there are chests for you to open, barrels for you to break, shrines for you to explore, and eventually you start picking up cards. Cards in Book of Demons are essentially just potions, spells and equipment. The fact that they're cards is just to stick with a Paperverse theme, and also for the developers to capitalise on the success of Slay the Spire and pretend that this game is a deck builder. You've got a limited number of slots to equip cards, but you can buy more from this old guy with a die-hard impression. Blue cards are spells and skill moves that consume mana every time they're played. Green cards are equipment, and each one requires a fixed amount of mana to wear, essentially reducing the maximum amount you have available. So if you wear more equipment, you'll have a stronger character, but you'll also be less flexible when it comes to using spells. Red potion cards are free to use, but have a limited number before you have to refill in town. Each class has its own small set of cards that you can find, but there are magic and legendary modifiers, and every card can be upgraded, so there's a good amount of variety in your character. When you've got cards, there's more to the combat. You'll still be highlighting enemies for your regular attack, but you'll be interjecting this with spells, and that's when the game gives off a real hack and slash vibe. Because when the game builds up after the first few levels, there are a lot of things you need to be reacting to. Some enemies can use spells, but while they're casting, you can click and hold to cancel them. Some enemies have shields, and you have to click and hold the icon to break the shield before you can damage them. Enemies with golden shields have periods of invulnerability after every time they take damage. Some enemies summon minions, and you want to kill them fast before you get overwhelmed. Spiders spawn smaller spiders when they die, and often deal poison damage. I really didn't expect it, but Book of Demons does have the intensity of a hack and slash action game. Probably one of the main reasons I didn't expect it was because of the game's avant-garde appearance. Think Trunk's Paperverse is imagined by every character having this 2D folded paper theme. I'm not sure if it's for everyone, but I think it looks really good. It also gives Book of Demons a distinctive appearance to stand out in an overpopulated genre. Because the entire game has the paper theme, there's a familiarity between everything. The enemies, the heroes, the townsfolk, even the menus and user interface graphics all use the same texture quality and harsh angles, and it makes the whole game feel like one combined world. There are actually quite a few details that are just added to help the world feel more complete. The town you go back to between levels has 4 written characters, and their dialogue is fully voice acted. All you do in the town is heal and look at cards, so this is a lot of effort to go to for something that's essentially a glorified menu screen, but it really adds to the game. The voice acting here is also pretty good, which unfortunately then highlights when it isn't. The first boss, the cook,
Master appreciate.
sounds like a Frank Oz character.
Just have to butcher you. Master will appreciate.
And there are enemies on the last level of the game whose response to damage is way too annoying. But those are really just the exceptions. Probably my favourite thing about Book of Demons though isn't the gameplay or the art, it's the little things. The small quality of life features that the game is full of. Like when you enter a level, there's a list at the top of how many key features you'll find on that floor. If you've walked past any items or gold, there's a dot on the minimap to show you exactly where it is. If you've collected everything in a level, you can teleport to the exit instead of having to waste a few seconds walking to the end. You can also tell the game how long you want to play for, so it can build levels with enough enjoyable content and variety, even if you're only playing for a few minutes. These are small details, but ones that a lot of titles don't have. And especially in the current climate of video games, it's nice to know that developers care. The developers of this Diablo tribute game are obviously in touch with their players, whereas the developers of the actual Diablo game...
And what, have phone?
Yeah, not so much. I do have a few issues to point out though. The combat is really good when you're strong. When you're weak, it's overly frantic and unenjoyable, because when your health bar keeps dropping perilously close to zero, you can't afford to focus on anything else. You stare at the bottom corner making sure that you can chug a health potion before you die, while running your character backwards away from the enemies. You don't have time to focus on breaking shields or cancelling spells or getting good uses from your action cards, you know, the stuff that makes this game fun. In the normal mode this doesn't happen a lot, but on the roguelike setting it is much more common. What would have made this game even better is being real time but pausable, like Faster Than Light or Dungeon of the Endless. What this type of mechanic does is emphasises decision making over reactions. So when you're in a dangerous situation you can quickly hit pause, look around, and make a choice about which enemy or action to focus on instead of just staring at your health bar. What it would also do is reduce the mechanical skill requirement. Book of Demons wants to be a hack and slash game distilled down into just the good bits. But one thing I've never felt was necessary in hack and slash games is precision. In this game, however, you need to make a bunch of pretty accurate clicks in real time to play well. That wouldn't normally be a bad thing, except attacking in Book of Demons doesn't really feel like attacking. It feels like selecting. If I fail to attack an enemy, that's on me, I should have aimed better. But if I fail to select an enemy, it feels like a flaw in the game. Being real time but pausable would solve this too, and the great thing about it is that if you don't like the pause function, you can play the game without it and then look down on everyone else who does. No pause main, by the way. Also, the difficulty progression isn't linear. It's more like a
big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
The enemies do get more health and you see more of them the further on you go, but really the difficulty of a situation comes from the combination of enemy types, the layout of the paths, and how the enemies deal with your best cards. So there might be a really powerful mini-boss with a lot of health, but if you've got a legendary ice weapon and he spends 90% of his time frozen, then that's a really easy fight. But at the same time, you could find it difficult to fight off some generic spiders because you aren't good at dealing with larger numbers of weaker enemies. So occasionally you'll have really hectic fights in one dungeon and then waltz through the next 10 without any trouble. Everything I've just said so far is mostly based on playing as the warrior on normal mode, which I recommend is how you play the game first. But I couldn't happily put out a review unless I'd actually played all of the game, so after the warrior I played the archer. Honestly, I just expected a reskin with some new cards that don't really change anything. I mean, the warrior could already use his sword attack at range, so what's an archer really going to do differently? I was wrong. Playing with the archer is a totally different game. Your arrows are real projectiles, so they don't go around corners and they damage the first enemy they hit. You can also switch to free aim mode and fire into the darkness, dealing damage to enemies you can't even see. With the warrior, movement is just about determining caution or aggression, but with the archer it becomes way more important. Obviously when fighting melee enemies you just want to be backing up and keeping space, but now that you can contest ranged enemies at distance, you're going to be finding perpendicular paths and micromanaging dodges. It's a totally different way of playing the game. The mage is somewhere in between the two. You've still got the need for dodging, and ideally you'll be fighting at a distance, but you've also got a variety of spells to keep you strong in close quarters combat. The extra classes add more life to the game, and so does the roguelike mode, which isn't actually roguelike at all. This is a roguelike deck builder that isn't a roguelike or a deck builder. The normal mode is more scripted. For example, the first card you get is going to be the health potion because it makes sense to get that immediately in the game. There are cards for each character that you're likely to find early on, and so it's more of a linear, balanced upgrade path. In the roguelike mode, card drops are randomised, and this adds a lot more variety by potentially forcing you into builds you wouldn't normally try. The roguelike mode is also harder, and if you die you can be revived for a price, but the cost increases with every death, and if you can't pay, you can't play, and you die for good. Overall, I have to say that Book of Demons is an incredibly polished game. There's just so much quality in here, and the developers clearly put in the time and effort during the 2 years spent in early access to make the game the best it can be. Minus the real-time but pausable option, but hey, you can't have everything. It's a beautiful looking game and manages to come across as truly original while feeling very familiar. It says a lot about Book of Demons that I could describe this game as being unique despite it being made from the most common tropes in indie gaming. This is just the first game in the 7-game series, and while I'm not close to being done with Book of Demons even after 20 plus hours of play, I am already looking forward to the next one. Thank you for watching this video, and wait, hold up, I think the cook wants to say something.
If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe you can.
Ah, thanks cook. Anyway, I hope you heard everything you wanted to hear about Book of Demons in this review, or just enjoyed the ride. And if you want to watch another video, there's one on the side of the screen right now. Goodbye.